Hello and welcome to the Between the Tackles podcast. I am Doug Codd. I'm joined here, as usual, by Zach Cox, and we've got Henry McKenna filling in for Michaela Vernava today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. And Henry McKenna is from USA Today Sports Media Group, Patriot Wire. So follow him. What's your Twitter account?
At McKenna Analysis.
Follow him.
I like it.
Follow him. So we just got done watching the second joint practice with the Patriots against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I guess opening topic here is, what did we just watch? What did we see out there? Henry, let's start off with you. What was your number one takeaway from practice today?
Number one takeaway was that Gronk treated this like his preseason game that he won't have.
Yes.
Gronk doesn't play in preseason, but today he was participating fully, obviously, like he has been, and he was playing better, I'd say, than he has all of training camp. I believe he had 7 catches, 6 of them were touchdown catches. The one that wasn't a touchdown ended up being a back shoulder fade that went out of bounds and set up a Gostkowski kick simulation, so it helped score points. Overall, he played really, really well, and after a quiet few set of days, it was, I think, good to see him playing well.
Yeah, he's had some drops as of late, and there was, some reports out there that Gronk doesn't look 100%, and I guess before today's practice, you possibly could have said that he didn't look 100%, didn't quite look like himself, but he put all of the doubts to rest today, I thought, and like you said, many catches, many touchdowns. Probably won't see him at all this preseason, so good sign that he was able to come out here today against the Jaguars in a joint practice session and have that kind of practice. Zach, what was your number one takeaway?
My number one takeaway included Gronk's performance, which obviously was tremendous. I would agree with Henry that it was his best that we've seen of this entire offseason. But just overall, the Patriots stars played like stars today. I mean, Brady had a very good day. Brandin Cooks continues to just haul in ridiculous highlight reel catches. I mean, as we talked about before, he's just going to add a whole new dimension to this offense. He's looked like one of the best players on the field throughout the summer. Then over on the defensive side, Malcolm Butler, Stephon Gilmore, they broke up Blake Bortles' first 2 pass attempts of 11-on-11 drills, had a couple other breakups later in the day, and even a few more earlier in one-on-ones. Just all the players that you expect to dominate on the Patriots side, they did today.
Yeah, solid practice out there for Malcolm Butler. I think he got his hands on 2 or 3 passes out there from the Jaguars quarterbacks, which, I mean, it is the Jaguars quarterbacks. Can't really expect too much out of them, but I think they went a combined 8 for 21, Blake Bortles and Chad Henne against Patriots defense.
Yeah,
and
not great.
Not very impressive. One other takeaway just from practice today is that there are a lot of guys out, which was kind of strange. We've kind of got used to Matthew Slater being the only player who isn't practicing. Then you've got the guys who are limited out there on the side field. But today, what was it? It was Eric Rowe, Shea McClellan, Trevor Bates,
Tony Garcia.
Tony Garcia. I think that was the 5, right? Plus Matthew Slater.
Yeah.
All those guys not at practice. So they do have a walkthrough tomorrow against Jaguars. We'll see if those guys are back out there. If they are, then maybe they will participate in that preseason game against the Jaguars on Thursday. But if they aren't out there tomorrow, then we probably won't get to see those players. Then other guys, whether it's Connor McDermott over Antonio Garcia, Jonathan Jones over Eric Rowe, some of these other players will get the opportunity to shine in that preseason game. Let's just get into some guys that we probably won't see in that preseason game while we're at it. The guys who do work on the lower field, that's usually Nate Solder, Cody Hollister, Mike Gillislee,
James
O'Shaughnessy,
David
Jones, the safety. So those are guys that most likely we will not see in the preseason game. We'll have to wait to see some of those guys. Now everyone's kind of excited to see Mike Gillislee, but could be another week or 2 before we get to see him. Not really sure what he's dealing with, but not out there.
The lack of Gillislee as a full participant has kind of made it difficult to really predict what this running back group is going to look like this year. I mean, we've seen a lot of Brandon Bolden carries, who I don't think many people think is going to play any sort of role at all on this offense this year. And then you have obviously Dion Lewis, James White, Rex Burkhead, who also has been nicked up a little bit. He was out there today. He looked like a full participant, but he was limited a little bit earlier in camp. So, yeah, Gillislee being out, and really we've only been able to see full Mike Gillislee once this whole camp on that very first day of full pads. He had a couple nice goal line runs on that one day. But other than that, he's been relegated to that side field, so who knows when we'll actually see him on the field this preseason.
What we may have learned about from Gillislee's absence is perhaps what they intend to do with Rex Burkhead. When he came in people wondered, well, he's versatile. They already have pass catchers. Eventually they added Gillislee. That's more of a power runner. But what we may see now from Burkhead is that when one of those guys gets injured, he's going to fill in. He's their utility knife, and so he can step up. Today he was taking goal line carries. I think 1 or 2 really good runs. So I think they expect him to fill in the cracks when necessary.
Yeah, and they really have 2 of those utility knife guys, those Swiss Army knife guys, in Dion Lewis and in Rex Burkhead. And they have kind of the smaller Swiss Army knife, and they've got the bigger guy in Rex Burkhead. I'm not really sure what the different knives are in that situation. Maybe like a paring knife and a steak knife or something, or like a
utility knife.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe like I don't know what a big Swiss Army knife is called.
Well, Crocodile Dundee's knife.
Yeah, that would be Burkhead, I guess. And then like a Swiss Army knife would be Dion Lewis, the little one that you store in your pocket and keep your keys on or something. But we digress. Dion Lewis.
Producer's laughing at us right now.
He is. I thought that Dion Lewis had a pretty good practice out there today. Well, just while we're talking about today, he had a nice long run. He's still making guys miss. Full season now, recovered from that torn ACL. So he was a guy that, because of his contract situation, because they re-signed James White, they gave Rex Burkhead and Mike Gillislee more money than Lewis is earning. A lot of people thought that Lewis might be on that roster bubble coming into September when they do have to make those cuts. At this point, I'm really not seeing that. I think that he will be on this roster come September, and they will have perhaps the most versatile backfield in the NFL. It'll be a nightmare for fantasy owners, but good for the Patriots.
And more importantly for the Patriots, it'll be a nightmare for defensive coordinators that have to game plan against them. I think everyone will anticipate one thing, and the Patriots will that week do the opposite because they can.
Yeah.
I think of last year, I believe the Patriots were expected to run the ball a lot against the Steelers, and they actually ended up throwing the ball. But you look at how those running backs can do everything or one thing very well. And I think they're going to put 2 running backs on the field together a lot of the times, kind of like the new version of the 2 tight end set with a 2 running back set. But I also think, with Burkhead, with Lewis being utility men and Gillislee and White being sort of focused on one thing, that's going to be a group that wreaks havoc on opposing defenses.
Yeah, and with Lewis, really the only thing that's held him back in his Patriots career has been health. I mean, he lost the first half of his first season to that ACL, which in turn cost him basically the first half of the second season. So we really haven't seen him put together a full 16 games of healthiness, I guess, if you want to call it that. And even though last year he came back, he was productive. He was a very good player for that second half of the year and going into the playoffs. I don't think he was quite the player he was in 2015. So maybe now that he's almost a year removed from that most recent surgery that he had. If he can come back and be the player that he was 2 years ago, then we were going to say it all the time, adds another dimension to this Patriots offense. But for him, it's all about staying healthy. So I'm interested to see how much they use him in this preseason.
Yeah, certainly in this preseason, and even going into the season, because they limited him a little bit last year just because of the injury. But with the depth that they have there, I think that they might be able to use him on kick returns. They might be able to use him just a little bit more, break off the shackles a little bit and just let him do his thing. And if he gets hurt, that's too bad. He gets hurt. But they have other guys who can fill in for him if that's the case. While we are talking about explosive offensive weapons, let's get into Brandin Cooks a little bit. Expectations for Mr. Cooks this season. Julian Edelman called him Cookie today. Great nickname. Julian Edelman's kind of the master of nicknames. My favorite of all time was when he called Ryan Mallett Maldog. I think he came up with that one just on the spot on the top of his head, but whenever I see the name Ryan Mallett, I always think of Maldog at this point, and Cookie's just another in the long line of them. So Cookie, he's been unbelievable the last couple of practices, and it seems like he's really kind of fully now living up to the expectations that we set for him when they traded for him. So I guess this is kind of putting you on the spot, but what's the line that you expect out of Brandin Cooks at the end of the season? Is he their leading receiver? Is he going to be that number one guy this season?
I think so. I think he's going to be the most productive receiver in terms of yards. I don't see him being the most productive in terms of touchdowns. I think that the Patriots have too many talented red zone options in Gronkowski and Allen, even in Hogan. So a guy like Cooks may not see 10 touchdowns, may not even see 8, but I definitely could see him getting 1,200 yards, maybe more, probably more.
Yeah, and that's pretty unbelievable because and he was putting up 1,000-yard seasons with the Saints, but this really could wind up being his most productive season, and that's with all of these other weapons around. But, I mean, maybe we are building this up a little bit too much just based off these two practices, but I mean, the guy has 4 touchdowns in 2 joint practices against the Saints, had 2 really long ones yesterday. He grabbed an Odell Beckham-esque one-handed catch yesterday, another touchdown today. So what do you think? Do you think he will be the leading receiver?
I think in terms of yardage, I would agree with that. You could argue for Julian Edelman as well. I think Julian Edelman might have more catches than Brandin Cooks this year, but I do think Cooks will be the yardage leader. We were just talking about this earlier. The way that Brandin Cooks plays, almost the most impressive thing about him is that he just looks effortless when he's out there. He has this quiet swagger. I don't even know what the exact word to describe it, but he just looks like he's on a different level than the defenders he's playing against. We talked to AJ Boye, the Jacksonville cornerback yesterday, and he was talking about Brandin Cooks. He says, yeah, we know that we put a post safety there to stop him from running past the last line of defense. And then he just runs past the last line of defense anyway. I mean, he's a guy that you can – I mean, I don't want to put him on Randy Moss level of what Moss was doing in 2007, but it's the same kind of idea where just the speed that he has, his ability to get open, especially down the field, you can know that it's going to come, and it's still very difficult to stop.
Yeah, I think what I'm most impressed with so far is just how he can kind of control his speed out there. He'll glide to start off a route, and then when he has to hit that turbo button – he does, and he just runs right past defenders. And that's something that's difficult for some receivers to do, to not always be running at that 100% level, because then you can throw defenders off. And we keep seeing it. I think he's going to do it all season, and it's just really up to Tom Brady as to whether he can throw it far enough to hit Cooks, because we've actually seen Cooks having to slow down a couple times to catch those passes. But Brady's deep ball has been better as of late. So I don't see that being a problem, but I mean, Cooks is definitely the fastest weapon he's had since Randy Moss.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add on Cooks is that what surprised me about him is that with his small frame, he's still able to fight off bigger cornerbacks for the ball in 50-50 situations. Yeah. So he's a little guy, but you see him, sometimes it's a sneaky use of shoulders, sometimes it's the fact that he can just reach over the cornerback and grab the football. He's very creative in the way that he fights for the ball with a small size. I think you think of Isaiah Thomas, a smaller guy who attacks the rim. It's kind of that same sense of space, how to use the space, how to use your small frame. Cooks does that in jump ball situations, and it's really impressive and surprising.
Yeah, and we actually saw him using Cooks a little bit creatively today. My phone just fell. We're all good. Got a big case on it. We're good. And, you know, some shovel passes, some end around, some fakes with him. So I think they will use him possibly a little bit more creatively than the Saints used him. We've also seen him catch some punts, which is something they didn't really do with New Orleans. So it seems like the Patriots will be willing to be creative with Cooks. We'll get back to the Patriots in training camp in a second, but I wanted to just talk about the Dolphins quarterback situation real quickly. Ryan Tannehill appears as though his season is over. They haven't made it official yet, but another partially torn ACL for him. Dolphins signed Jay Cutler. I'm just curious on you guys' takes on this. I'll let you guys answer in a second. I think that the Dolphins' upside is nearly the same with Cutler at quarterback versus what it would have been with Ryan Tannehill. I think that the Dolphins could probably go 10-5, maybe 10-6, maybe 11-5 with either quarterback. But I think their floor is significantly lower with Jay Cutler at quarterback. If Cutler plays like he did last year, the Dolphins could go 5-11. They could just have a disastrous season. I think that regardless of how Tannehill played this season, if he stayed healthy, they probably could have gone about 7-9 or 8-8 at the worst. With Cutler in there now, there's just a wide variance of how they could do this season. So what do you think this changes for the Dolphins?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that when you see a guy like Jay Cutler enter a locker room, Cutler has never been the vocal leader. He's never been one to handle adversity all that well, at least from what we've seen on the outside. And so if the Dolphins don't meet the expectations that were set for them under Tannehill, you could see a guy like Cutler not do a very good job helping them hold together a locker room. And I could honestly see a bit of a collapse happening in Miami's locker room by just adding Cutler for basically a lack of addition at the quarterback position.
Right.
No, I totally agree with both of your points. Yeah. I think they do have kind of the same ceiling. I think Cutler is a better quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. I don't think he's good by any means, but I think if you rate all of the top 1 through 40 or 50, I think he's maybe around 20, maybe in the mid-20s. He's not awful. He's not. He'll be far from the worst starting quarterback in the NFL this season. I'll say that. But he does have that Cutler effect where, at the moments, a moment of adversity, especially now that he has experienced a little bit of retirement. He basically admitted he's not in the best shape right now. He said he doesn't need to be in the best cardiovascular shape to play quarterback.
Only a professional athlete.
I mean, I can see him. They maybe hit a slide. They lose 2 games in a row. He has a game where he throws 3 picks. I can see him almost being like, why am I even doing this? I mean, the Pats don't play him till week 12. Basically, everybody thinks that he will either be injured or off the team by week 12. So that really says something about the faith that people are putting in Jay Cutler.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a little harsh on him. He definitely collapsed last season, had a terrible year. Year before, he was pretty good with Adam Gase. It was one of his best seasons. So, like I said, I mean, I could see them going 10-6 with him at quarterback, and I just don't think that there's that much of a drop-off. I think that Ryan Tannehill is a Jay Cutler type of quarterback, not in his attitude, but when you have Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, or say you had Jay Cutler 4 years ago, you're just in this like weird middle period where your quarterback's never going to be good enough to win you a Super Bowl, but he's also not bad enough that you have to go to the well and use a number 1 overall pick or use a first-round pick on a quarterback. You're just kind of content with having someone who's serviceable.
You're like the equivalent of a 7 or 8 seed in the NBA. Like,
right.
You'll be all right, but you're not going to beat LeBron.
No, absolutely.
And Tannehill also, I think the Dolphins every year say, this is the year Tannehill takes the next step and is a top 10 or elite, whatever, quarterback. And it doesn't happen, right? And he's still got that, like, glimmer of upside that we maybe the Dolphins think is actually going to turn into something significant, and it doesn't every year. But Cutler, on the other hand, I think is more talented than Tannehill probably, but we know exactly what he is, which is good, not great, and definitely not a leader.
He's been dropped into a pretty decent situation though right now. This Dolphins offense, even without Ryan Tannehill, has the potential to be pretty good. I mean, they have a lot of talented wide receivers. If Jay Ajayi can be anything like he was for most of last season, they can be pretty good, and the defense isn't too shabby either. I mean, I can easily see this team. I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to competing with the Patriots for the AFC's title, but I didn't think they were going to do that anyway. I can definitely see them as a squeaking in as a wild card team, though, even with Jay Cutler.
Yeah, you just slot them right into that number 2 in the AFC East. I don't think the Jets or the Bills are going to catch them, and they certainly can't catch the Patriots with how everything's going right now. But I actually liked the Dolphins offseason. They didn't spend too much money on anyone coming in. They didn't get the big like Malik Jackson type signing or anything. I thought they spent their money pretty wisely and just mainly kept their team intact. So we'll see how it all works out for them. But they could have done worse than having Jay Cutler. They could have Blake Bortles at quarterback. So let's get into the Patriots pass rush. This is a gigantic question mark as far as the Patriots go. They don't have
probably
many
the biggest,
question marks.
I would say.
Certainly the biggest, because they only really have 4 defensive ends, like pure defensive ends on this roster. You've got Trey Flowers, Dietrich Wise, Coney Ealy, and Caleb Kidder. Yeah. Well, I guess Geno Grissom too, though he does sometimes play some linebacker in there as well. So, and then you've got all those hybrid guys. You've got Harvey Longy, and you've got Shea McClellan and Kyle Van Noy, and you could even possibly throw Dante Hightower in the mix. So how do you see the Patriots front 7 looking in week 1? Who are the starters at, I guess, defensive end and linebacker other than Trey Flowers, Dante Hightower, Malcolm Brown, and Alan Branch? How do you see it shaking out?
Well, I'm going to elude the question a little bit here and say that it won't matter who starts. I think no matter what, in week 1, it's going to be a heavy rotation of players. But I think you see Flowers, and right now we're seeing a lot of Dietrich Wise. I think I'm going to stick with him because Coney Ealy has been so inconsistent that I think the Patriots sent him a message during the scrimmage last week and said, you're on the white team, which is the team that had the backups, and Dietrich Wise was with the blue team, which is the team that had all the top starting defensive talent. So I think that was a big message to Ealy that he wasn't doing what the Pats wanted him to do, and so Wise, I think, has the upper hand. And then I like Hightower, Van Noy, and probably Landon Roberts, I guess.
Interesting.
David Harris.
Okay.
David Harris is as their combo there.
How do you see it going?
I think either the way it's looking right now, it looks like either Dietrich Wise or Harvey Longy will end up being with that first unit. I think it's kind of hard to evaluate until we do see Dante Hightower back in there, and even see Alan Branch back in there, because there have been times this camp where Harvey Longy will start in the end, and then Dietrich Wise pushes down into the defensive tackle spot in some of those sub packages. But I agree. I think Wise definitely has the inside track right now. I know he was a guy that not many people were expecting a lot of, at least as a rookie. I mean, I know I wasn't. I liked the tools that he had. I liked his length and athleticism and all that. Yeah. But I didn't think he was going to be as significant a part of the Patriots' plans as it looks like he is so far. And then I think I also like David Harris in there in the starting rotation. He's a little bit older, obviously. Who knows how much tread he has left on his tires, so to speak. But so far he hasn't been spectacular in camp, but he's not really a spectacular kind of player. He's been solid, and I think you'll see him in there too.
Yeah, I like that choice. Those choices. I have the feeling that McClellan will be in there. I don't know why. I think that they like him. They might see him taking that Rob Ninkovich role. So I guess it's a loaded question, because you've got base defense, you've got sub defense. They mainly use their sub defense. I think that Dietrich Wise at this point would be in their sub defense, that starting sub defense. McClellan might be in that starting base defense. David Harris would as well. But I think that they do. I think it would benefit them to hammer down some, 50, 60 snap per game players, not just Dante Hightower. I'd like Kyle Van Noy to emerge as one of those guys, not be a guy who's only playing 50 or 60% of snaps, but a guy who's playing 100% of snaps. I think that he has the talent to do it. Perhaps Trey Flowers does too. He was another guy who was only playing about 60 or 70% of snaps last season by the end of the season. So I'd like to see him be a 100% snap guy as well out there.
I think an issue, or I don't know if you would call it an issue, but a factor in this group is that outside of Trey Flowers and Dante Hightower, everybody really seems pretty evenly matched. I mean, It's very hard to see some of these guys. None of these guys have really risen up to say that's the guy that we're going to go with. I mean, Van Noy, McClellan, even Landon Roberts, Dietrich Wise, Harvey Longy, those guys are pretty young. The other guys were good but not great players last year, and from what we've seen so far in camp, it looks like they might be moving around a little bit too. So it's really hard to get a good handle on who is actually going to be out there. Like Henry said earlier, I think it's going to be many different players. I mean, in the end, this is kind of a good thing where you have 7 guys who can theoretically play in these 3 or 4 spots, but it does make it very hard to project out.
I think it works much like the running back situation. It might also work out. I think that the Patriots like having so many players that can do so many different things. So when Dante Hightower takes the field on the first snap against Kansas City, Alex Smith is going to have to figure out if he's going to be playing on the edge or playing in the middle.
If he's the Mike,
Same thing with Kyle Van Noy, same thing with Shea McClellan. I think they like having those guys that can do a lot of different things. And just like their running backs are going to be kind of making defensive coordinators scratch their heads, the linebackers are probably going to be making the offensive coordinators, the opposing offensive coordinators scratch their heads.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive how many of those hybrid edge linebacker guys they have, because it really is Hightower, Longy, McClellan, Van Noy. All of those guys have experience playing inside linebacker. All of them have experience playing outside linebacker, and they all have experience playing on the edge as well. And we'll get into these guys a little bit later, but just while we're talking about the Patriots pass rush, I've been paying a lot of attention to the one-on-one pass rush drills against the Jaguars so far, and I don't think Harvey Longy or Adam Butler has lost a rep so far. It's pretty wild, because those are 2 undrafted free agents, and Harvey Longy planted a guy on his backside today. It was a backup offensive tackle, but this is an undrafted free agent linebacker that we're talking about. On the next rep, I think it was, he pulled a spin move that completely confused the guy. Adam Butler's out there schooling guys at defensive tackle, so he's another player to watch as far as the pass rush goes. So a lot of upside in the pass rush, but not a lot of sure things out there for the Patriots just yet. Like I said, we will get into those guys a little bit later, but let's talk about Vince Wilfork real quick. There's going to be a retirement ceremony here behind us at Gillette Stadium. For once, Vince Wilfork, he announced his retirement yesterday. So I guess what's just the legacy of Vince Wilfork? Is he just another, classic Patriots Hall of Fame guy, or could you actually see him potentially getting to the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
I think he definitely deserves consideration for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't know if he will get in because it's very difficult for pure space-eating defensive tackles to get in. I was looking it up yesterday, I believe it's only 4, maybe 5 pure defensive tackles have gotten into the Hall of Fame since 1996. Wow. So, and one of them was Warren Sapp, who was one of the best players of his generation. Yeah. So it's not an easy, it's a very high bar to get in there. But, I mean, I don't know how Vince Wilfork is viewed outside of New England. But, I mean, we are guys who've watched him pretty much his entire career here, and he was a transcendent player. I mean, he's a 350-ish pound guy who was also one of the most athletic guys on the Patriots. He was really one of only 2 guys, him and Tom Brady, who bridged the gap between the original Patriots dynasty, then those 10 years without a championship. Then his last season here was the season they beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. He made 5 Pro Bowls, only had 1 All-Pro team. I think he only had something like 16 sacks in his career. So his numbers and his accolades aren't incredibly impressive, I guess you could say. But with a player like that, you can't really look at numbers as you judge him. He changed the way that offensive coordinators had to game plan against the Patriots because you needed 2 or 3 guys to block him on every play.
What do you think?
Definitely a shoe-in for the Patriots Hall of Fame. Yeah. And then I agree with Zach in that he deserves consideration. Now, I'm not sure that he'll get in for all the same reasons as Zach. He's the kind of guy that if you study film, you'll see just how exciting he is. If you look at nuance, you'll see how exciting he is. But it's not always exciting to look in the nuance. And so a guy like him might get overlooked a little bit at a position that gets overlooked often, as you cited, sort of statistically. And I think for his legacy, just speaking more broadly, I think I loved watching just generally the stat-free approach to the game. They often label him sort of like a space eater, right? But when he's eating space up, it often meant that it was like putting a dam in a river. The river will just kind of go the other direction. So he was like a setup man for a lot of other players on the defense to get easy tackles. And I think in that regard, not a lot of stats, but definitely a prolific player in the non-statistical categories.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. I can't see him getting in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think it would take quite a while, and there's so many other guys out there. But it is kind of a fascinating idea that in this gigantic Patriots dynasty, what is it now, 17, 18 seasons, whatever it is, how many of these guys are actually even going to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Because, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but like the Steel Curtain Steelers, I think a lot of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. The Cowboys teams of the 70s, a lot of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. With the Cowboys teams of the 90s, I just don't know how many of these players that we've seen throughout the years will actually get into the Hall of Fame. Obviously, Tom Brady will. I think that Rob Gronkowski will. Clearly, Bill Belichick will.
Julian Edelman is maybe not even a guarantee.
No, I don't think he's not a guarantee yet. He's on the track. I think if he has another couple seasons like he has, then he'll make a good case. But
yeah, I mean, he would almost have to get in on like the Kurt Warner track of like being a good story. Wes Welker, I think, as far as stats goes, has the better case for the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't have the Super Bowl wins.
I don't think he does the transcendence of Wes Welker too. I think just the fact that he, like, when he came in, he kind of changed the way that people viewed that slot receiver position. But yeah, like you said, it's hard to look at any blocks.
Seymour,
maybe Richard Seymour.
He deserves it, I think. But I mean, he's not even in the Patriots Hall of Fame at this point. So
I think you'll see Ty Lock get in eventually.
Maybe
it might take him another couple years. I think you'll see him. Obviously, you'll see Brady get in. Obviously,
Rodney Harrison.
Belichick. Rodney Harrison, I think, should probably be in. But really, like slam dunks, looking at it, it's Brady and Belichick, and that's kind of it, right?
I might throw Gronk in the mix. I think that he's like,
as long as as injuries don't derail him.
But if Gronk has another injury, if Gronk has another back injury this year and he's done, is he in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I mean, Terrell Davis is. So that's the case you make, because Terrell Davis legitimately only had 4 seasons of production. I don't know off the top of my head how many Gronk has of 1,000 yards. Is it 3 or 4 seasons at this point?
It's close to it.
If that. But, I mean, at the same time with Gronk, he only won one Super Bowl. He was on injured reserve when they won the Super Bowl last season. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy, though. This is a team that's been built in the middle class. Not a lot of the high-class players, and certainly not a lot of low-class players.
Especially, I mean, like most of the players that you think of when you think of Patriots. You think of Troy Brown, you think of Teddy Bruschi, guys who are never going to come. Even Rob Ninkovich, guys who are never going to come close to making the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but have been some of the best players and the most productive players in the best era maybe the best era in NFL history. Probably, definitely the best era in NFL history.
Yeah. So we'll see, but yeah, can't see too many of those guys getting in. Final segment here. Let's state our case on something. There's a lot of bubble players who are making a significant impact in Patriots training camp, but there's only so many roster spots, only 53 to be exact. So this is really one of the most stacked Patriots rosters I've seen since I've been covering the team since 2013. So who is your bubble player that you think most deserves to make the Patriots initial 53-man roster, and why?
So I'm going to go with someone we've already been praising a little bit here, and it's Harvey Longy, an edge player for the Patriots. He has, as Doug said earlier, been outstanding in one-on-ones. I think he's also been pretty solid in 11-on-11s. He got a sack, I believe, on the first 11-on-11 snap today. Yep. So a guy that has clearly listened and observed and learned the Patriots defense as fast as he can, and he was an undrafted free agent who I guess had a little bit of hype as far as undrafted free agents go, because he got guaranteed the most money this offseason among all undrafted free agents.
I think it was a record, like an NFL record.
Excluding Laramie Tunsil.
Oh, true. What's his name?
La'el Collins.
La'el Collins,
La'el Collins. So, yeah, I believe it was a record. So he had a little bit of hype, and he's living up to it, and then some. He's one of those Patriots rookies who has, like Doug said, this team is so talented and so deep, and yet all of a sudden there's like anywhere between 1 and 4 rookies who are in the starting group on that defense. So it's honestly a little shocking to see so many rookies making an impact, and also one who went undrafted at that defensive end spot.
Yeah, he did make my last 53-man roster projection. It's crazy to think that he went undrafted. I don't really know how this happens, where a guy goes undrafted. I mean, there were reports out there before the draft that Bill Belichick had told Longy or someone at BYU that the Patriots would have used a first-round pick on him if he had come out in the 2016 NFL draft. Then 1 year later, he goes undrafted. I think some of that really does have to do with his age. He's definitely an older rookie. I think he's either 24 or 25 years old, because he did go on the LDS mission at BYU, missed 1 or 2 seasons that way. And, you know, teams definitely don't value older players the way that they do younger players. But, I mean, he's a guy who's a starting linebacker right now. I don't know if that will change when Dante Hightower comes back. You might see Longy moved into the second group, but it's very clear that they adore Harvey Longy based on what we've seen so far. Who is your guy, Zach?
My guy, I'm going to have a very large asterisk on this because they have not played a single preseason game yet, so we do not know how he will handle his punt return duties once the bright lights come on and the game really starts up for real. Right now, Cyrus Jones, I mean, he still hasn't been really offering too much on the defensive side of the ball, but I've got to give him credit. I mean, we gave him a ton of crap all of last season, even through the spring, about his inability to catch punts, and beyond his inability to catch them, just his propensity for brain farts in the return game, just making dumb decisions and not catching balls he shouldn't, not catching balls he should. So far, he's been fine. I mean, he's been good. He dropped the very first punt that I saw in training camp on the very first day, a week and a half ago or whatever. Since then, he's been perfect, unless he's been dropping a few that I didn't happen to catch.
No.
He's been great so far. I mean, I think I don't think he's going to play a significant role on the defense this year, at least not to start the season, but they really, really, really want him to be their punt returner and probably their kick returner as well, or else they wouldn't have been pushing it as hard as they have the last 2 years. Right now, still a potential for a meltdown during the preseason, which might let Kenny Moore or one of these undrafted guys kind of leap him on the 53-man. But so far, I think he's making the team.
Yeah, he really has been good on those punt returns, and we'll see how he does. If he can score a couple of touchdowns during the preseason, that would be huge.
Because with the ball in his hand, he's electric.
He's explosive, yeah.
Even watching his highlights from last preseason and the few opportunities he got during the regular season, he's very good. As long as once he gets the ball and holds on to it, he's a very talented returner. So.
Yeah, I still haven't been that impressed with him defensively. I
haven't either.
He did look decent during the scrimmage that the Patriots had, their inter-squad scrimmage, so we'll see how he does in the preseason. But as far as pure cornerback play, I have been more impressed with Kenny Moore, an undrafted free agent, maybe even DJ Killings, who's another undrafted free agent, and certainly the top 4 guys who are above those guys, which are Malcolm Butler, Stephon Gilmore, Jonathan Jones, and Eric Rowe. One thing that I've never really discussed about Cyrus Jones, just the element of a cornerback being a punt returner is strange. If you have good enough hands to catch a punt, and if you're explosive enough with the ball in your hand, why aren't you a wide receiver? Why aren't you a running back?
Well, maybe he has been muffing a lot of punts. So.
But that's problematic, right? To be a punt returner who can't catch?
Fair enough.
To be a punt returner who doesn't have good enough hands to be a wide reciever?
Right. Well, it's an
interesting element, right? It is. Catch like this rather than catching like I guess,
because you can pin it to your body versus being a good receiver is often about catching the ball away from your body.
The biggest reason that I do think that Kenny Moore and Killings have been better on the defensive side so far this camp. But basically they're battling for the 4 and 5, the 4th and 5th cornerback spots, which means they're probably not going to see the field much anyway because those top 4 spots look to be pretty locked up between Butler, Gilmore, Eric Rowe, and Jonathan Jones. So considering this guy is probably not a person that's going to help you that much on defense anyway, then maybe they wanted a guy that's more of a special teams threat.
I did have Cyrus Jones on my last 53-man roster projection. Not sure if I already said that. My guy actually is one that I didn't have on my 53-man roster projection, but that's only because I'm waiting to see him in the preseason, and that's Adam Butler, undrafted defensive tackle out of Vanderbilt. Watching him in one-on-one pass rushing drills is really fun. He makes me audibly gasp at times because he beats an offensive lineman so quickly off the snap. I'm not sure if this is just him doing this well in one-on-one situations where the entire team isn't around him. Maybe he just has great technique and fundamentals. But the Patriots seem to like him too because he's one of those rookies, the 4 or 5 or whatever we see in the starting defense relatively frequently. And we'll see if that holds up when Alan Branch comes off the PUP list. But Branch and Butler aren't really the same type of player. Alan Branch isn't that interior pass rusher, and I think that's how they view Adam Butler, and I think that he is a guy who could steal a roster spot. Reminds me a lot of Anthony Johnson, who stole a roster spot last season as that interior pass rusher, just because there's not that many of those guys out there, and sometimes it's the kind of guy that you can find as a steal. Even, some of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL were 4th or 5th round draft picks just because they're undersized defensive tackles who get by on their athleticism rather than their strength. And that's at least what I'm seeing from Adam Butler so far. I really wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy who after the preseason has, 1.5 sacks and 6 or 7 pressures, and then all of a sudden they might have to create a roster spot for him, whether it's through injuries or releasing a guy that you did expect to make the team. But I think that they kind of need that element too, since there is so much uncertainty in the pass rush this season. They'll certainly have Trey Flowers in there, maybe even kicking inside. But if they could get a guy like Butler up to speed and playing the interior role, then you can keep Trey Flowers on the outside, which is, I think, where he really thrives as a pass rusher, rather than kicking him inside, where you're kind of forcing him out of position a little bit there.
Biggest surprise of training camp so far, I might say, Adam Butler. This is a guy I had zero expectations
Not on the radar.
I honestly didn't really know a whole lot about him going into training camp. There were some undrafted free agents that kind of caught our eye, the Harvey Longies, the Austin Carrs, where we say, maybe this guy can come in, and Kenny Moore after what he did in spring practice. Adam Butler, he was completely off my radar, and now he's very much on my radar after what he's been doing these last couple of days.
Yeah. And it's interesting, so many of these rookies have emerged in a draft where Belichick only picked 4.
Yeah,
so many people thought, well, the Patriots are trading out of the draft when they acquired Brandin Cooks, when they acquired Dwayne Allen, when they acquired Coney Ealy. And yet they're expecting these rookies, at least for now, while the injuries are still happening, while Dante Hightower and Alan Branch are on the PUP. But these guys are already having big roles on the defense, so it's interesting kind of flipping on its head the expectations we had for this draft class.
Definitely, and while we're talking about the draft class, Derek Rivers actually did get some work with the first team today. I think that was mostly because Shea McClellan wasn't out there, but he took on a little bit of a stand-up interior rushing role, playing a little bit of linebacker in there. And he's another guy who's flashed at times during one-on-one drills, not quite as much as Longy or Butler, but he certainly has the athleticism and the speed to wrap around the edge and maybe get a quarterback from behind there. So another guy that will be very fun to watch during the preseason. I don't know about you guys, but I am psyched, at least for the first preseason game. Usually by the fourth one, I'm like, all right, I'm past this. I'm ready for the regular season.
Apparently Goodell is too, because he's trying to knock off a game.
That is a rule change I can 1,000% get behind.
Yeah.
The fourth preseason game, not particularly watchable. First preseason game, though, very exciting.
I will say fourth will be better this year, though, because at least it's still a full 90-man roster rather than the 75-man roster.
True.
And when it was a 75-man roster, you're basically seeing the same exact guys playing the entire game. So we will see how the preseason game goes against the Jaguars. I'm certainly expecting a Patriots win, maybe a couple picks from Blake Bortles if he does play. But I think that will do it for us.
Speaking of Patriots win, we're about to go challenge Jacksonville Media in the annual media game right out here behind us. So,
are you guaranteeing a victory?
I am not. We did not have the best showing against the New Orleans media last year, so hopefully I'll take some improvement this year.
But we've got some new quarterbacks.
Yeah, one of us maybe. Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe a star will be born today.
Yeah. I'll listen up the eye. I'm gonna throw it over some mountains.
Like the Cam kid.
Yeah, my over/under on pulled hammies is 2.5. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, as far as next man up goes, I think last year our quarterbacks were Scott Zolak and Steve Burton, a couple of former Division I guys, one former NFL guy. Pretty big drop off to us, but we'll see how we do. So thank you for watching, and keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage, and go to YouTube.com for some more Patriots content and coverage.